Well, welcome to fantastic Sunday morning on the East Coast anyway. Well, it's a little overcast, but that still makes it great. December 11th, 2011, towards the end of the year. And here we are with White Owl Reports with Michael Edward, and I'm Michael, so you get to hear me deal with another part of the special White Owl Reports that we're doing with Harry Hubbard and Paul Schaffranke, and their site is illinoiscaves.com. This is now part 11. I had figured in the beginning this might be a 6 or possibly, really push it a 10-parter. Well, as we go on, we're finding more and more, and a lot of things in the past week have really surfaced, tying into the Illinois caves and the artifacts that were in there. We have new pictures of things. We're kind of scrambling. Our producer, Lynn, is scrambling to get links up and everything else and pictures on illinoiscaves.com. She's helping Harry and Paul out with all that and get it up on our site at livinglightnetwork.org and also worldvisionportal.org. So this is turning into a series and actually a show all of its own, and today is surely no exception of amazing revelations of what is being shown in these artifacts out of the Illinois caves. So I've got today, for I believe it's our third week in a row here, I've got Paul Schaffranke, who was the one who he did more than translate. He came up with how to decipher many of these tablets, and we're going to speak about some of them today. One of the terms that Paul and Harry came up with because of the translation was called Happy Land, and that's what they were calling where they were in what we call Illinois now, in southern Illinois. That was Happy Land. And it sounds kind of odd, but it's just because of the way that it translated. And that ties into Mark Antony and ties into Alexander Helios, who's cartouche, and basically his name and signature are all over the artifacts that have come out of the southern Illinois caves. So one more reminder, take a good look, illinoiscaves.com. We're going to mention one of the videos called the Lazarian Map video. That is on that site. Just go into where the videos are. It's free. Get an education and be prepared to be astounded. All right, well, Paul, that was our intro. I don't want to waste any more time. You've got a lot to go over. So where do you want to start? How about the Lazarian Map video?
Well, I just have to make a comment about the Lazarian Map collection. I thank everybody that has viewed it and watched it. It's been a lot of people that have viewed it, and it has been brought to my attention that the Lazarian Map collection has been listed in Wikipedia under the topic of Hollow Earth.
Wow.
As the most recent research, it goes all the way to 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century, all the writers who brought up a case for the Hollow Earth. And here it says, 21st century, in 2011, Horatio Valens and Paul Vanetti presented a 2-hour Lazarian Map collection video on centuries-old maps of the Arctic region and the North Pole, making a case for a 100-mile-wide canyon in the center of the physical North Pole into which north-flowing rivers drain into a hollow earth. The maps were collected by Harry Hubbard. Okay, I do want to tell the audience that the Lazarian Map collection initially was absolutely not intended to present a case for the Hollow Earth. These were maps that Harry just collected, and he wanted me to translate, and we looked at a few things. And initially, Harry asked me to help him film these maps for insurance claim purposes. That was the only reason for making a video in the first place, for insurance claims, so that in case the condo got damaged by a hurricane or a fire or something, we had everything documented on videotape so he could get an insurance claim. As we were filming it and I was translating some of this, we found some of these strange things and anomalies, and then we remade the whole thing into what is called the Lazarian Map collection. And I guess people see it as a very good case for the Hollow Earth, even though that was not our intention in the first place. However, as a response, the famous North Pole maps from the 1500s, the Bargos Islands, that would say, we've been getting photographs, uplinks from people saying these are NASA satellite photographs of the North Pole. And it's unbelievable, some of the landmass areas that are exactly identical, like one of the channels coming out. Mm-hmm. However, it appears to me that possibly in the 15 or 1600s, that it was free of ice at that point, and supposedly since the 1700s, we may have had a 300-year mini ice age in the North Pole, and now it seems like the glaciers are receding up there, which they call this global warming and all this, which I don't believe in. I just believe there's like mini ice ages every 300 years, and as the ice is receding, more recent pictures of the North Pole, it's starting to show these islands very well. Almost like the maps from the 1500s, almost identical. So whoever mapped them back then did a fantastic job. It just seems like in the 1600s or so it got covered with ice, and now it's starting to melt again. So I think there's like mini ice ages come and go, and even geology has proven that this is happening.
Well, I
thank everybody for watching it. They enjoy it. I mean, it's just...
Yeah,
it was never intended to be a research project. This amazes me, and it's like, wow.
Well, yeah, it's no different. All right, we're talking about maps that are back from the late 1500s, early 1600s. I believe most of them were in Latin that you had translated.
Yeah.
And another part of those maps showed the island of Friesland off of Iceland, which doesn't exist.
Right.
So it's no more to say that an island disappeared, which it did, called Friesland. It no longer is. That's no more far-fetched than to turn around and say, the whole North Pole, the pole was mapped, and it wasn't a frozen tundra.
And the picture that we present at the end of NASA photographs comes from the 70s. And it shows most of it covered in ice, the little hole at the top, but it shows one of the major deltas of one of the rivers pretty well. But recently I've received other photographs of more recent NASA photographs of the North Pole, and it shows like more landmass showing, so it seems like the ice is melting up there. So something is happening.
Well, it could be why the Russians want to claim so much up there. There's politics involved, so we know that we're not going to get the truth. Huh?
And they're keeping everybody in the dark as to exactly what's happening. So
wow. Well, that all ties into to the caves in southern Illinois, and it was really cool that Harry had all these maps before either he or you were even looking into what was going on with this particular cave in southern Illinois. So, that was kind of putting the facts before the find. And I think everything with the tomb, Alexander the Great, hey, it's the lost tomb, and everything now, especially in this past week, Paul, some of these pictures that Harry supplied to us of things that came out of that cave that are not yet on the site IllinoisCaves.com are proving it even more. So let's get into some of that, because one of the things that's all new for me is that the Happy Land stuff. I mentioned that in the beginning with Mark Antony and Alexander Helios, and it's all tied to what was found in the Illinois caves in the tomb. So let's talk about what was going on and Mark Antony and all that at the time, because these artifacts are basically stone history books. They're showing on the one that I'm getting to that I know that you want to talk about is a certain battle that took place in Mark Antony. And here there's this picture of it with an X with a circle around it where his camp was, I believe, and it shows the fish out in the Mediterranean and all that. So let's talk about that.
You figured that out.
I sure did, man. That hit me right away. I'm going, oh my. Yeah, it hit me right away. But I had never studied that particular battle before, so now I'm really interested. You know all about this. So, and by the way, real quick, before you go into anybody who's in our chat, we're going to list the pictures, and this is the chat with Blog Talk Radio live during our show right now. We're going to give you links to the pictures that Paul is about to talk about, and in particularly this battle called the Battle of Actium, which was depicted in a stone artifact, perfectly depicted, that came out of the Illinois caves. So this all ties together, but we need a history lesson as to how this came about. So
okay, I'm glad you saw the correlation immediately from the pictures that I sent you.
I did. I thought at first maybe just the Nile with the Mediterranean, but no, the curve in the land was a little bit different. So I actually went and looked on a world map, and I wanted to see where there was an inlet like that would be like the Nile, perhaps. And guess where it took me? It took me to Turkey. So I just went around until I figured it out. So I'm glad I guessed.
Well, it's a very good guess. But let me tell you, let's go to the photograph, the one that is labeled as Mark Antony.
Okay, that's the one that
Mark Antony A, the face, the man.
Okay, we'll be posting that in chat right now.
Okay. There's a few interesting things here. I have only seen this I saw this photograph years ago. As far as the rear, I did not see that until a week ago. This one with the man in the front, he's wearing this kind of oriental-looking head garb, and it was presented to me a long time ago, and I was like thinking, well, it's probably some Persian man or something like that. And I looked at it, and I said, well, he kind of has an aquiline nose. It looks more like a Roman, but he's wearing some kind of oriental garb. And then I looked at the letters in the bottom. It doesn't directly give a name, but it gives some titles and abbreviations. Now, you look at the bottom, you see those three letters with the three lines?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a V after that.
I know who that is.
Okay, that is an abbreviation for Tresvere, Latin Tresvere, which means triumvir. And then before that, you also see a C, which means consul and triumvir, and dressed up in this Eastern garb. I came to a conclusion 15 years ago when I first pictured. I said, Harry, this is a portrait of Mark Antony. He doesn't have the typical Roman headdress, but it shows him as Tresvere. Now, there's other coins on Illinois site, some of the gold replica coins that also have that. It has a translation of a man of good standing, triumvir, Tresvere, Marcus Antonius. It has a coin of him here. But here it shows a portrait of him, and I concluded 15 years ago, and I told everybody that this is Mark Antony dressed up in an Oriental headgear. Now, they could have taken my word for it and everything that I correctly did the abbreviations at the bottom. However, a week ago came the clincher. The reverse of the stone, which you see, is Mark Antony B. You flip the stone over, and what do you see here? You see a map, what looks like a landmass. There's land to the east, an inlet or a river, and it's a very crude map representation. And when I first looked at it, I kind of was like, well, what in the world is that? But then I magnified it and looked at it closely, and it actually shows the most significant event which transpired in Mark Antony's life and career. And whoever carved this probably did not want to directly name him. He just put the titles down under the name and turned this thing around and said, well, this is what happened. What you see is you see the landmass, this little river or inland lake, a circle across to the south of the river, and you see water marks, like the little water waves, but chaotically in different directions. you see a boat at the top, just facing downward, another front of a boat, which is half of it, facing outward, and you see fish scattered completely in different directions. And you see a piece of what could be a piece of wood or debris. And this is very significant because I came to the conclusion that this depicts the Battle of Actium. This is the worst defeat. This is the worst defeat that Mark Antony ever suffered in his life, and it ended his career. Him and Cleopatra were finished off by this victor. This was a battle between Antony and Cleopatra and the other triumvirate, Octavian. This was the final Roman civil war at that time to decide who rules the empire, and it was decided in a massive naval engagement at Actium. This stone here is actually depicting, this chaos on a stone depicts Mark Antony on one end, and in the rear it shows his worst part is the Battle of Actium, and this is what this stone shows. And apparently you figured it out.
Well, yeah, you know what tied it in, and I'll just be honest, the circle with a perfect X in it, the perfect cross in it, is exactly the same as indigenous North American medicine wheel with the 4 colors and the 4 quadrants, and it's seen all throughout history, but it shows on the backside where the map is showing the battle scene, it has that circle with a cross, and then on the front side on his helmet, it shows the same thing. That was obviously being used as a sign for Alexander the Great. That was his kind of signature sign. That's how I was looking at it.
It could, or location. A lot of times it's a location. But obviously the site where the circle crosses was with the location of his camp during that battle.
But he has that same sign. It's also on his helmet. So that's how I was tying it together, was that's not a mistake.
No. That's where he was exactly, in the sign on the helmet also. However, the artist depicted that, but it shows the man in the front, and then the rear, this is a very crude, ancient representation of the Battle of Actium. And when you take a photo that I sent you, upload it, the actual photo, what it looks like, the geography, you can actually see. In comparison.
We've got that on the chat as well. We've got the link for the Battle of Actium, the whole map and everything, so that people can compare that with this particular Mark Antony front and rear is how it shows on the links. But
and
a
rear
reminder,
part I've never seen before up till a week ago.
Wow.
So this is another artifact that is perfectly matching a named individual to the most important event in his life, which was the defeat at the Battle of Actium.
Wow.
So now it is obvious that these artifacts in the Illinois cave, that it all occurred after the Battle of Actium, because somebody also recorded this.
Yeah. This came from the Illinois caves.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to deny.
A forger or anything, This is one of the things that shows the authenticity of it. I mean, it's so.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, and when I thought that maybe I was getting it right, and of course I didn't know for sure until right before the show today, where I got to ask. It's just mind-boggling to me. It almost puts you in shock that here, sitting in what's called Little Egypt in southern Illinois, that was in a cave, is a record of an historical battle that all Europeans had in their history books, so to speak. And now we're seeing it was sitting in southern Illinois. That can't be a mistake. And like you said, who could forge that one?
No, nothing.
That's impossible.
And all the map drawings in ancient times were extremely crude, very basic, extremely crude. But this here, I mean, this is just beyond any proof of authenticity right there.
Well, Mark Antony was also mentioning other stuff that came from the caves. I mean, here we have the greatest battle, the biggest event in his life, where he got defeated. there's also some other things that you had translated right back there 16 years ago.
Yes.
That were also mentioning Mark Antony. Can you relate to any of them? This happy
some of the medallion. There's a kind of a golden medallion that it showed. It translated Mark Antony, a man of good standing, consul, triumpher, father of Helios the king.
Father of Helios the king. So this is where we get into Alexander Helios having his signature all over the stuff that came out of those caves.
His signature is all over. Alexander Helios disappeared from history completely. All they know is that after Mark Antony and Cleopatra committed suicide, that his brother Ptolemy Philadelphus and his sister Cleopatra Selene, the three children, were raised by Octavian's sister Octavia, who also was married to Mark Antony. She took in those three children and raised them in the imperial household. Mm-hmm. We know that Cleopatra Selene married a client king named Yuba of Mauritania. Mauritania is what today would be northern Algeria and Morocco. He ruled over this area, and she became Queen of Mauritania. Yuba was known to have a fleet, and he has been credited with sailing to the Canary Islands and even beyond. Nobody knows what happened, the details of it, but ancient historians do recall Yuba making it at least to the Canary Islands.
Well, apparently he made it all the way to Mississippi.
As far as we know about Alexander Helios and Ptolemy Philadelphus, nothing. There's like theory, well, they died, they just disappeared. We hear nothing of them growing up and, becoming prominent citizens of Roman citizens like other client children. You would hear about them. They would either become commanders of auxiliaries in the legions, or they would fight in some significant battle. But these two you don't hear anything about. All you hear about is Queen Cleopatra Selene, the wife of King Yuba. You don't hear about her two little brothers, what happened to them. However, we find in Illinois Cave this Alexander Helios as an adult and as a ruler over here. And that he
I'm sorry,
and that in his adult life, he not only came over here and started ruling over here, he also apparently at one point went back to Egypt, or with the help of Yuba, and got the national treasure, or the corpse of Alexander the Great, as well as some of the Ptolemies, as well as his mother and father, and brought their remains from over there and deposited them in the Illinois caves. This is the history.
That's a lot for people to swallow, but that's why you guys are putting all these pictures of the actual artifacts that were taken out of the cave, and why you got them there for people to go over themselves. Seeing is either going to make you believe, or you're going to think it's all just a scam. But just with what you brought up today with Mark Antony's Battle of Actium, and that shows so perfect to me.
I know
it does. It's just so obvious. Okay, the naysayers are going to say, "Oh, you're jumping to conclusions." Well, okay, maybe we'll give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Okay, if you don't believe in that one stone, fine. Go look at the other ones and tell me it's wrong.
Well, the whole thing about this is what got me at first when I looked at it. First of all, I came to the conclusion, well, it is a map. Mm-hmm. The water is facing to the west. There's land and a little inlet or river facing to the east. The thing that I found very amazing is that it's not orderly. Like if it's a calm sea, you would have the water the ripples go in one direction. The fish and everything would be in just one uniform direction, as you see in other artifacts, the calm seas. This is depicting something very chaotic out in the water. A ship facing downward, a half of a ship, a bunch of wooden planks, fish in different directions. This is depicting a chaotic event out in the water involving ships.
Just like a battle scene.
Exactly, and in the back you have one that I identified as Mark Antony. Well, Mark Antony's biggest event in his life was his defeat at the Battle of Actium, and my hypothesis is that the back of the stone is an actual crude depiction of the Battle of Actium, found in the Illinois caves.
So in Illinois, we're seeing, from these caves, we're seeing history about the great Roman Mark Antony, who ended up with Cleopatra of Egypt. And then we've also got King Juba involved. And then we start getting in basically to where it's not showing just one depiction of a certain time or an era. It's all these together are showing what we would call history books from before they settled with where these were found in southern Illinois. So it's really the things that have been taken out of the cave are showing that it's obviously a library of an amazing magnitude.
Well, what I'm thinking about is a lot of these artifacts are some good artwork, and some of it is very crude. There may be a library of scrolls that they brought over. But, for example, a lot of the schools in those days for teenagers or people that were learning, they were done out in the open. And it could be like a simple assignment, like, okay, students, here's a nice carving you made of the triumvirate of Mark Antony. On the other side, depict the most important thing that you would consider would be associated with this individual that you learned about, and somebody carved in the Battle of Actium. You see that a lot with other stones. It may have been made by teenagers or students that were learning their history from back home. They may have been born here, and their parents or their grandparents or whoever was along here was telling them these stories, and they were carving them into these rocks.
Or at the least aids, visual aids to teach history.
Visual aids. Teaching tools, like somebody would make hundreds of these rocks and say, okay, this is Mark Antony, reverse the Battle of Actium, okay? Like we use flashcards today. Well, in those days, they may have used these stones made out of this material as visual aids or teaching aids. It's just more I'm seeing. It's just so amazing. I mean, I guess other people can come up with other conclusions, but it just shows these black rocks are so abundant in the thousands that it could have been a deposit for teaching or visual aids. And then in addition also that the gold was found in marble pieces and everything. These black rocks may have been a big, huge cache of thousands of rocks that people have made, just as visual aids to remember their lives and the history.
Well, aren't some of the rocks Harry had spoken earlier in this whole series, he had spoken about where some of the stone was the same stone that you only find in Italy.
Yes.
So, there's no way that got mined, or at least nobody's aware of that particular kind of stone being available anywhere in Illinois.
I don't know. It could be a possibly. Maybe there was something like that where they made a moat stone. Some of it looks like it's almost artificially put together and dried. It's possible. I don't know. We've heard from Scott Walter and other people saying that there is a place, an outcropping of this type of material stone, but nobody's yet been able to take us over there. So hopefully there may be a spot. I don't know. But another theory that Jack Ward had many years ago is that this rock came from possibly Italy or Libya, and it was used as ballast stones. And they had so much of it that they unloaded it and decided to use it to carve things into it.
Okay.
That is a theory that Jack Ward had. That's a possibility, too.
Yeah, no, that would make sense, and really couldn't argue with that because ships like that were top-heavy when they were loaded by the construction and how they were made. So, yeah, you would have to have ballast. In fact, even true wood boats made these days, sometimes they float too well, and you have to have ballast. So it makes sense to me because I do know about construction of wood boats. So,
but even if we found a outcropping of this type of rock or a mudstone or something that can be made, it's quite possible that they had a source for it there and just inscribed with their information on them. We don't know. But until somebody shows it to us, it's still speculation.
Yeah, well, it's all a lot of speculation except for one thing. The events that are depicted, as well as the writing, shows that it's not speculation.
No, it's so amazing, and so much history has been kept from us. Like how the common people wrote, how they depicted things, is so different than what the history is being passed on to us. We know probably a lot of events that are recorded and have been passed down are accurate, but a lot of others have been either deliberately kept from the public's knowledge, maybe possibly secret societies maybe withholding information, and some of it is just outright false and ridiculous. It's obvious that some of the works are medieval fictions that they call ancient history.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one thing that really gets me is another example that I believe has been covered up, and it's opening a big can of worms in Europe, is the famous pyramids of Bosnia. They're actually excavating them and showing that these are possibly the largest pyramids, even larger than Giza, built, and artifacts have been found that contain a very similar script as is found in the Illinois caves.
Ooh.
And even though those Bosnian pyramids may be extremely old, thousands of years old, the artifacts that I've seen that were excavated from them are only about 2,000 years old. They come from Roman times, and they're basically local tribes people or people that lived from that area had seen those pyramids and knew that they were sacred sites and deposited these artifacts as offerings to these gods for protection. But what gets me is that obviously people back then knew about these Bosnian pyramids, but nothing is mentioned in ancient history about them. So I think it's once again another situation where information is being withheld.
Well, okay, that's no different than the Illinois caves. It really isn't. Who knows? Maybe there's a damn pyramid somewhere in southern Illinois. They found enough mounds, but I have no doubt that there's smaller pyramids. It's Little Egypt for a reason. That name just didn't come about by mistake.
The Bosnian pyramid, obviously ancient people 2,000 years knew about them. They're probably thousands and thousands of years old, but they still brought offerings to them to get help from the gods because there was a sacred area. Well, you would think that some Latin writer or Greek writer would have definitely mentioned, well, there's a site where people go to that is similar to these Egyptian pyramids. Well, it's not mentioned. And Philip Coppens, who presented this, he's a Belgian writer who presented these pyramids. And there's a question, is this the greatest hoax in history? And my line is, no, it shouldn't be the question whether these Bosnian pyramids are the greatest hoax in history or real. My thing is, history is the greatest hoax in the recording of humankind. So my belief is that our history is possibly the greatest hoax because some of it you can verify, but a lot of it I believe has been withheld. And we're seeing that example with the pyramids in Bosnia and other sites around the world, plus with the Illinois cave. So either the information went lost or somebody has been withholding it forever.
Well, gee, I can only think of one power that for 2,000 years would deliberately suppress that kind of information if it wouldn't agree with what they wanted people to know. And I'm sorry to say that would have to be Rome.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there is no other power for 2,000 years that has influenced everything of every place known in the world. And,
exactly.
And I think Harry had mentioned on that one map, the Lazarian map, where from his collection, where that was in Latin, and there was, doesn't he say on a video there was only like one or two that are known to exist, and one of them surely or already has been confirmed, is sitting in the archives in Rome.
Yes.
So, that theory might just not be so far out that the history was suppressed because it didn't agree with quote-unquote Christianity, regardless of how you're going to define that. The politics involved with it obviously changed things because we're just finding out now too much history in different parts of the world, South America included, with their pyramids. We're just finding too many things to show that what our current modern history books teach us is only part of the truth.
Right.
Let's go to...
this Mark Anthony Stone is like one of the most amazing that just confirms not only the dating, but the authenticity. And talking about Alexander Helios, let's go to the Happy Land.
Well, yeah, I just want to mention we've got that. If you're in the live chat here, we've got that. It says Happy Land 2 or Happy Land 3, and this is a line drawing from the original to make it clear for everybody to see, and this will be posted on IllinoisCaves.com. We'll get all these things up there. We just got bombarded because of Harry within the past week with a lot of stuff, and it'll all get up there. Okay, my comments about that Happy Land drawing.
Okay.
You see an owl. You see what has been called the Egyptian Ankh. You see a lizard. You see an Alexander Helios. I know that sign. You're sealing that in there. You're seeing what look like waves from the sea.
Okay.
All right, explain this thing, because there's a foot in there. There's a cross in there. There's a baby chick, it looks like. What is this thing saying?
Okay, if anybody, there's a lot of people out there that can read Egyptian hieroglyphs. This is a clincher. Okay. This is very significant on a piece of gold. Okay, the reason we call it Happy Land is that Greek author Diodorus Siculus of Sicily, he wrote a history from the early Roman times about the Phoenicians and the Greeks up till Caesar's Gallic Wars, around 49 BC, up to that point. And in Diodorus Siculus, he writes about that the Carthaginians and the Phoenicians discovered this big island, many days sail west of Africa, which they call Libya, Africa, off the coast of Morocco. Many days sail, and there's a lot of people that talk about Atlantis. They quote that. But he speaks of it, that it's a land of mountains, rivers, and a land of bliss, a land of plenty, where the population is pretty much well taken care of because everything exists in that land. And this is where we come up with the term Happy Land, the land of bliss, the land of plenty.
Southern Illinois.
Well, America, North America, South America, Southern Illinois, the Caribbean, wherever. This is what, if you read Diodorus Siculus, this is what they write it in Greek. They call it the Happy Land, the land of bliss. And a couple authors talk about it, and people say, well, it's the Azores or the Canaries and all that. It's not. Okay, this particular one, gold medallion here, written in Egyptian hieroglyphs. It has a cartouche of where you see Helios. Right there in this, the fact is that the standard language of hieroglyphs from the Egyptian times, like the Pharaonic times, is Middle Egyptian. When I read these hieroglyphs, they're not exactly Middle Egyptian, though the words are there. It seems like a little more later variation where some of it got lost. So it would place it to the Ptolemaic times when the Greeks wrote it. But obviously a few scribes that sailed over here to America obviously some of them still know how to carve in Egyptian hieroglyphs because we have this here, and this has been done here in North America. For the reason that when you translate it, you start at the leftmost column and you read it from up till down. And then you have the second column with the mouth, the lizard. And then, curiously, you have Helios in a cartouche. Well, I translated before I've even seen this Helios. I came to the conclusion that it was Alexander Helios. Well, here you have his name in a cartouche, which pretty much says that this is the king. And I came to the conclusion without this that this was a king. But here it proves right there that Helios is the king. Another piece.
He's the king of this
yes.
happy land, this new land,
well,
the Americas.
We'll get to this.
Okay.
There is a very important thing here that also brings authenticity to this. One would ask, this is one question I had, why is Helios just written in this the script that was used by the Latins, Etruscans, Greek? Why was his name not written in Egyptian hieroglyphs? Well, I came to this conclusion that the reason, there's a very specific reason why it was not done, is because to write the name of the king in the Egyptian hieroglyphs, you would have to have ruled as king of Egypt. However, Alexander Helios never ruled as king in Egypt. His mother Cleopatra did. This is a king in exile, but the reason it shows it in cartouche is that he was of a royal family that ruled in Egypt. So I think whoever put this together did give the sacred language, but put his name in the script of his ancestors, was worded Greek, but also signifying that he never was king of Egypt. He was king of here. Now, the basic translation of this hieroglyph inscription going up, down is, it basically says, this is the era of this beautiful land and domain under its foremost leader and king of this land known as Bu-Nefer. Bu-Nefer in Egyptian, you can actually look at it in an Egyptian dictionary. Bu-Nefer means the land of happiness, the land of bliss, the land of plenty. So right there we know that Bu-Nefer is the name for North America.
Wow.
And then it goes on after that. Okay, our foremost king over this land of Bu-Nefer, who in praise, okay, is the supplier and who feeds our multitude or our people. And this is the lizard. It's a plural, meaning the multitude, the people, that he, Alexander Helios, nourishes our people. And then after that, it gives a name in a cartouche, Helios, our king. And then you see the face going towards the bottom, who is the living, the facial image of, and the final hieroglyph there where you see the little reed, the half circle and the water at the board, that's the Aten, which is the solar disk. And then after that, it shows the solar disk. So the entire translation of this hieroglyph is, this is our age of this beautiful land under our foremost king of this land named Bu-Nefer, Alexander Helios, who nourishes and feeds our multitude and is the living image of the solar disk, the Aten.
Wow.
Right there, this is like amazing. Right there, written in a hieroglyphic form, saying that he is the king of Bu-Nefer, which translates to happy land, land of bliss. Same thing Diodorus Siculus mentioned, calling this land many days sail west of Africa. And here we have it here, North America found here, that this is a ruler who did not rule in Egypt, but comes from an Egyptian ruling house, Helios Alexander, ruling right here in North America.
Wow. So he was the king of Happy Land.
Yes. King of
I kind of like Happy Land better than North America.
Or whatever.
or Bliss Land.
Valley. We don't know exactly what parts he ruled, but this right here just shows this is his home. So
they're describing the land and the king who takes care of them, who feeds them, and this is like utopia. They're describing utopia.
And he is the living image of the sun disk, our sun god, and then it shows the sun with the rays, that he is the representative, like the Pharaoh was, of the sun, and this is our king. Amazing.
That makes him Helios. Okay, I was going to ask about that right side, and you just described it. That's the sun with the rays. Okay.
Yeah,
wow.
It complements the very last glyph, which shows the face, and then the Aten, which is the word for the solar disk, the living Alexander Helios, the king, the living image of the solar disk, ruler of the first and foremost ruler of Bu-Nefer.
Wow. Again, people are going to go, there's no way this came out of a stupid cave located in southern Illinois, because there's never been any hint to a civilization before indigenous American Indians being in southern Illinois. History that we've been taught says there's no way. But it's really hard to argue with Egyptian glyphs that you can look up in the book and translate like you just did. And then you've got Alexander Helios involved, who was the king of this land. And this was before what we're told in our modern history books. We've been basically lied to say that an explorer came from Spain by the name of Christopher Columbus and discovered the Americas. The Americas were already established, and Alexander Helios was already king.
He was one king here we know about. And this is the thing. Here he is. He disappears from history as a small child. He turns up over here as king of North America. It shows his mother is Queen Cleopatra. His father is Mark Antony. He brought over, or with him came, the entire Ptolemaic crypt. Apparently was boarded on ships, brought over here, including the tomb of the sarcophagus of Alexander the Great, which was the national treasure of ancient history. And this is what Russell Burroughs described in the main crypt. There was nothing else it could have been. And he even had an artist draw a picture of what was described in the main crypt. And it even had on a wall, I think we have it on a site, but it came in one of the magazines, an artist rendition of Burroughs' description of the main crypt. And not only did it get me his description that this was very much the sarcophagus of Alexander the Great, a small golden one, but what got me is what the artist drew on the wall. And I have never been able to talk to the man who actually did the artwork. But the strange thing is on the wall, it showed a bunch of Indians putting Alexander standing around this rock tomb with those Egyptian-like sarcophagus. But on the wall, it showed a bunch of soldiers with giant pikes, like the Macedonian phalanx. So when I saw that, it also complemented who I believe that this has got to be Alexander the Great. And that the entire crypt was brought over here by Alexander Helios with the help of his brother-in-law, King Yuba. And from this Happy Land inscription here in hieroglyph, it shows him as ruler of this place called Bu-Nefer.
Well, we've also got, besides that main crypt, of which you've concluded by at least the information that you've been able to get, and some of that comes from Russell Burroughs, of which is that's questionable, and lots of people know that.
Right.
also, there were other tombs. There were other crypts within this tomb. And Harry had mentioned also Cleopatra is there. Cleopatra Selene.
Well, no, we know not Selena. The Queen Cleopatra and Mark Antony were, we believe, definitely were brought over.
What kind of things led you to that? Because that's something really hard for people to swallow. So, what was your thinking by what you had seen on the artifacts that led you to believe it's not just Alexander the Great, the lost tomb? You've also got Cleopatra and Mark Antony.
The other crypts that were there, and also there's one artifact that described Helios, the king, and he also possesses the Hellenic kings, which means his ancestors, that he is the possessor of his ancestors, which means that he has the remains of all his ancestors, starting with Alexander the Great. Why not go all the way to Cleopatra?
So I know this is speculation, but facts of what have come off of these artifacts are proving that it might not be speculation at all. What we have possibly is the entire, or at least a major part of the Library of Alexandria, along with the entombed Alexander the Great. So there could be so much more in there, of which that's what gets me excited. It makes me want to run out there with a shovel. There is so much more there, of more history of not just from 2,000 years ago, but even older than that. And that's the part that really excites me personally, is that we have at least a part of the Library of Alexandria from Alexander the Great, what he collected while he ruled the world, so to speak, the things that he had collected of history before his time.
Right. And
that's mind-boggling.
I think what happened is Queen Cleopatra, knowing that the Romans were going to take over before she committed suicide, put a lot of things into a special place. Like I said, that famous sanctuary at Tapaziris, the temple complex that Dr. Kathleen Martinez, a Dominican archaeologist, has recently uncovered, and she believes that Cleopatra and Mark Antony are buried there. Well, she's right. I believe the entire Ptolemaic Sema and a lot of information was deposited there until they were able to load them on the ships and then, sail out across the Atlantic Ocean. And all these. Cleopatra took care of that. She made sure that would happen, and then probably we don't know exactly what had happened. Like, I'm theorizing possibly when Alexander Helios was already in his 40s or something, maybe at a later date, when this big disaster happened in Germany, when the 3 legions got wiped out. There was such a panic in the Roman Empire that the removal of the entire crypt and information from Tapaziris onto hundreds of ships and just leave the port and leave the Mediterranean, that would have been a perfect time to do it.
Sure does explain why the Library of Alexandria is still called the Lost Library of Alexandria, and the same thing with Alexander the Great. The lost tomb, the lost crypt of Alexander the Great is never found, according to Rome and their history in the past 2,000 years.
No, everything that we read from ancient history from Augustus on, I believe, is just Roman propaganda. They would never want to admit that it got lost, so every subsequent emperor would have to say, "Well, of course, I visited the tomb and I've seen it." But
now, who was the one Roman? Gosh, I'm trying to remember now. You got so much stuff on IllinoisCaves.com. Who went to visit, or was in history previous to that, who claimed to have gone to the tomb of Alexander the Great in Alexandria, and there was some debate about how that was written, whether he actually saw Alexander the Great or just saw the gold covering, I can't remember the name for that would have been as the top over his body. You know what I'm talking about?
There's a very strange description. Now, they talk about a couple Roman emperors later that went into the tomb, but nobody ever talks about the corpse. I mean, yes, there's a location, what they called the tomb of Alexander, but it doesn't mean at that time that there was a body in there. And like I said last week, if it really was there, this national treasure, it would have gone to Rome with Octavian, who became Augustus. Well, there's a very strange thing that's talked about is that when supposedly Augustus visited the tomb of Alexander and saw the corpse of Alexander, this is like the last where actually witnessed the corpse, that he broke the nose. Now, this is very strange. Now, even a Greek archaeologist who believes that Alexander was interred somewhere else, he comes to a good conclusion saying, well, it could not have been the corpse of Alexander that Octavian saw. It had to have been an effigy or a statue that he somehow it had to have been a statue of Alexander or an effigy, and he broke the nose off of that. Because supposedly Alexander was encased in a coffin made out of alabaster, so how could you break the nose if it was encased like that? There's just no way. So he had to have broken the nose off an effigy. Another thing that Harry and I concluded is that possibly, everything was heavily censored in Roman times. You wrote something bad about the emperor, you'd either end up dead or get banished to the Black Sea.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times these writers had to write, between the lines, so you read it. Harry and I also concluded possibly that when Octavian walked into the tomb of Alexander, he saw this effigy or a fake mummy or something, and in rage busted the nose because he realized that it was no longer there. So he got very angry and broke the nose, and this is what is recorded in history. So you have to read between the lines. Why would he break the nose visiting a national treasure? Something was wrong with the whole thing.
Something wasn't right.
No, it wasn't there when he came in. Cleopatra tricked him. She had her last word with him.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't there.
Even in her physical death.
Yes. It was no longer there. And then, of course, subsequent emperors had to kind of say, oh, yes, the tomb of Alexander. But I believe that was all propaganda, just to cover up. It would have been a disgrace. How do you lose a national treasure like that? That cannot get out to the public. So they had to say, well, it's officially the tomb of Alexander.
That would be an embarrassment for the Roman Empire to turn around and say it's lost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it didn't get lost until the Roman Empire fell. How convenient.
Yeah. That is also, that's a good point to make. It didn't get lost until the Roman Empire fell. Of course, then they say, well, the Christians, they destroyed the Library of Alexandria in 395 A.D. Then they say, well, they took his body out and threw the bones out in the desert or something like that. But that would have been recorded, too,
Yeah.
It's well documented about the destruction of the scrolls in the library by the Christians in Alexandria. That would have been recorded, too, but surprisingly, when the Roman Empire fell, Alexander disappeared, too. So who was covering up the whole thing the whole time?
Well, like I said in the beginning, keeps pointing to Rome. Rewrite history, or at least keep the important parts out. Well, we ran out of time again. I'm just boggled. I'm boggled with this. I'm almost speechless because, that Happy Land Egyptian glyphs. Wow. It just kind of, it puts it all together. This has been, part 11, but I'll tell you what, this has really tied everything that you and Harry have been speaking about on these reports on this series. Today was the day to tie it together to me more than ever. So anybody wants to say, nope, the Illinois Tombs is a bunch of garbage, well, now you got a lot to argue with. There's more and more artifacts that we're just now getting pictures of. And that's what Harry's been working on. And apparently, Paul, you've got some translation work to do. There's some new stuff in there from what I saw anyway. So I guess you're going to have some more revelations here pretty soon.
I don't know. Some of it is very. It's like it seems like there's some new languages on there, possibly Celtiberian from Spain, and that is extremely difficult. I mean, I don't know.
Like I said, you got work to do. All right.
I wish we had more people to join in on it because there's a lot of work to be done.
Well, I think some are because of these shows. I think we're going to attract some people to really help put more pieces together. You and Harry have done an amazing job, and at this almost 19 years now. So it's time to let everybody know. Paul, thanks again. I'm baffled by everything that I learned today. I don't know about anybody else, but as for me, this has really put some stuff together. And anybody wants to say because Russell Burroughs was involved with discovering this cave, then it's all hokey pokey and can't be true. As of today, that argument just can't go any longer. He was a fool and stole a lot, and he pilfered just for the sake of money. But then again, there's lots of people in throughout all history have been that way. But what has been found out of there, nobody can really argue with anymore, Paul. So it's just going to continue with more and more proof. Okay, we'll catch you next week. Thanks again, Paul.
Okay.
All right, well, this is part 11, Whitehall Reports in our special series dealing with the Illinois Caves. You can find that at illinoiscaves.com and look at livinglightnetwork.org. We'll have video and, of course, full audio of this, and you can also find it right here on Blog Talk Radio with Living Light Network channel. All right, well, thank you again for listening, and remember, be who you were created to be.
Inform, enlighten, alive and amplify. This is the Living Light Network.
I do want to tell the audience that the Lazaria map collection initially was absolutely not intended to present a case for the Hollow Earth. These were maps that Harry just collected, and he wanted me to translate, and we looked at a few things. And initially, Harry asked me to help him film these maps for insurance claim purposes. That was the only reason for making a video in the first place, for insurance claims, so that in case the condo got damaged by a hurricane or a fire or something, we had everything documented on videotape so he could get an insurance claim. As we were filming and I was translating some of this, we found some of these strange things and anomalies, and then we remade the whole thing into what is called the Lazaria map collection, and I guess people see it as a very good case for the Hollow Earth, even though that was not our intention in the first place. However, as a response, the famous North Pole maps from the 1500s, the Bargos Islands, that we say, we've been getting photographs, uplinks from people saying these are NASA satellite photographs of the North Pole. And it's unbelievable, some of the landmass areas that are exactly identical, like one of the channels coming out.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's
site. Just go into where the videos are. It's free. Get an education and be prepared to be astounded. All right, well, Paul, that was our intro. I don't want to waste any more time. You got a lot to go over. So where do you want to start? Let's, how about the Lazaria map video?
Well, I just have to make a comment about the Lazaria map collection. I thank everybody that has viewed it and watched it. It's been a lot of people that have viewed it, and it has been brought to my attention that the Lazaria map collection has been listed in Wikipedia under the topic of Hollow Earth.
Wow.
As the most recent research, it goes all the way to 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century, all the writers who brought up a case for the Hollow Earth. And here it says, 21st century, in 2011, Horatio Valens and Paul Vanetti presented a 2-hour Lazaria map collection video on centuries-old maps of the Arctic region and the North Pole, making a case for a 100-mile-wide canyon in the center of the physical North Pole into which north-flowing rivers drain into a hollow earth. The maps were collected by Harry Hubbard. Okay, it appears to me that possibly in the 15 or 1600s that it was free of ice at that point, and supposedly since the 1700s we may have had a 300-year mini ice age in the North Pole, and now it seems like the glaciers are receding up there, which they call this global warming and all this, which I don't believe in. I just believe there's like mini ice ages every 300 years. And as the ice is receding, more recent pictures of the North Pole, it's starting to show these islands very well, almost like the maps from the 1500s, almost identical. So whoever mapped them back then did a fantastic job. It just seems like in the 1600s or so it got covered with ice, and now it's starting to melt again. So I think there's like mini ice ages come and go, and even geology has proven that this is happening.
Well, I
thank everybody for watching it. If they enjoy it, I mean, it's just.
Yeah,
it was never intended to be a research project. This amazes me, and it's like, wow.
Well, yeah, it's no different. All right, we're talking about maps that are back from the late 1500s, early 1600s. I believe most of them were in Latin that you had translated.
Yeah.
And another part of those maps showed the island of Friesland off. Well, welcome to fantastic Sunday morning on the East Coast anyway. Well, it's a little overcast, but that still makes it great. December 11th, 2011, towards the end of the year. And here we are with White Owl Reports with Michael Edward, and I'm Michael, so you get to hear me deal with another part of the special White Owl Reports that we're doing with Harry Hubbard and Paul Schaffranke. And their site is IllinoisCaves.com. This is now part 11. I had figured in the beginning this might be a 6 or possibly, really push it, a 10-parter. Well, as we go on, we're finding more and more, and a lot of things in the past week have really surfaced, tying into the Illinois caves and the artifacts that were in there. We have new pictures of things. We're kind of scrambling. Our producer, Lynn, is scrambling to get links up and everything else and pictures on IllinoisCaves.com. She's helping Harry and Paul out with all that and get it up on our site at livinglightnetwork.org and also worldvisionportal.org. So this is turning into a series and actually a show all of its own, and today is surely no exception of amazing revelations of what is being shown in these artifacts out of the Illinois caves. So I've got today, for I believe it's our third week in a row here, I've got Paul Schaffranke, who was the one who he did more than translate. He came up with how to decipher many of these tablets, and we're going to speak about some of them today. One of the terms that Paul and Harry came up with because of the translation was called Happy Land, and that's what they were calling where they were in what we call Illinois now, in southern Illinois. That was Happy Land. And it sounds kind of odd, but it's just because of the way that it translated. And that ties into Mark Antony and ties into Alexander Helios, who's Cartouche, and basically basically his name and signature are all over the artifacts that have come out of the Southern Illinois caves. So one more reminder, take a good look, IllinoisCaves.com. We're going to mention one of the videos called the Lazarian Map video. That is on that